If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday, working towards the weekend. Appreciate you hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos, and loads to do over the next 2 hours. Luke Johnson talking Saints in 15 minutes. Joe Healy setting the stage for the SEC baseball weekend to come at 1:30. We'll chat with Chris Blair at 2:15 talking Tigers. The Sweet 16 cranks up tonight. It's opening day. Blake Baker talked a little bit earlier. You get the picture. There's a lot to do over the course of the next 2 hours. We appreciate you making us part of your Thursday. Let's start things the way we start every single day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
All right, let's crank it up. LSU and Mississippi State tonight from the box, and it got a little bit more interesting yesterday evening and this morning when we learned about the pitching plans. I'll get to that in a second, but just to kind of set the stage for this game tonight, Mississippi State comes in struggling. They are 16-9 on the season. They are 1-5 in league play. They went to the Astros tournament earlier in the pre-conference. They crushed Rice by 10-run rule, and then they lost to Arizona and lost to Oklahoma State. They've lost midweek games to Southern Miss and Troy. They were swept by Texas in Starkville 2 weeks ago, 8-7, 5-3, and 4-1. And then they went to Oklahoma, and after winning an incredible pitcher's duel in Game 1 with Pico Khan and Kyson Witherspoon going at it, they win that game 2-1. They lose game 2, 13-11, and lose game 3, 7-3. In the second game of that series, they made 5 errors in the first 3 innings. So you're talking about a team that is up against it. They're 1-5. And I was listening to Thunder and Lightning, great Mississippi State podcast. Brian Haydad, Robbie Falk do it. And, they were thinking about, man, if they go to Baton Rouge and they get swept and they're 1-8, like, can you recover from that? And we know the answer is yes, you can. But, man, does it make your life tough. And that's LSU's job this weekend, to try to make Mississippi State's life as tough as possible. Now, when I saw this game on the schedule and I watched both of these teams play for the first 3 weeks of the season, I looked at it and went, oh, well, that's going to set up one of the better pitching matchups in the conference in game 1 of that series with Pico Khan and Cade Anderson getting the baseball. Those two guys have been phenomenal for their two teams through 6 weeks of baseball. We're not getting that tonight. It's a day earlier. It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. So Chris Lemonis has decided, for whatever reason, whether it's to avoid Cade Anderson or to keep Pico Khan on his normal rest, he's going to throw Khan on Friday, and he's going to put Evan Ciari in there on Thursday night to start in the game tonight. Now, my opinion is he's keeping Khan on his normal rest, and I think he probably sees it as more of an advantage spot for him against Anthony Ianson. I watched teams pitch off of Aaron Nola for 2 years, and I watched teams pitch off of Paul Skeens at the end of 23. And those two necessitate that. You weren't going to beat those guys. Arkansas beat Skeens once. South Carolina beat Skeens once in a rain-shortened game. It happened twice in the 8 games, but it was statistically an improbability. And Nola was nearly unhittable in the same way. And I watched teams pitch off. And I don't think Anderson has earned that yet. Now, I think Anderson's been awesome. I'm not trying to denigrate Anderson at all. But, I think that if this was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday series, that you probably see Pico Khan go on Friday against Cade Anderson. I just think Chris Lemonis is looking at this going, I can give myself a pretty big advantage on Friday. Let's do that. We'll see. I realize I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth with that, but I don't think it's purely an Anderson thing. I think it's a Con thing. I think it's being on the road. I think there are some factors at play. Either way, that's what we're getting. So tonight, you're getting Cade Anderson against Evan Ciari. Ciari is a guy that is not ticketed for a long outing tonight. He's made 6 appearances this year. He's started 1 game. He's worked 11 2/3 innings on the season, giving up 3 earned runs on 7 hits. He struck out 15 and walked 3. His opponent batting average is 171. However, he did pitch against Oklahoma last weekend, and they did get after him a little bit for the first time all year. In the 3 innings he threw against Oklahoma, he gave up 4 hits, all 3 of his earned runs on the season. He only struck out 1, walked 1, gave up a home run through 40 pitches. His longest outing of the year is 30 pitches. Last year we saw Evan Ciari take the mound against LSU. LSU tagged him early and often. He threw 3 innings in that game against LSU. He gave up 5 hits in those 3 innings, 3 earned runs, 2 homers against LSU. So LSU's seen him before. He's not a guy that's expected to go 7 innings. He is not a guy that's got big-time SEC stuff. He's not a huge draft prospect. He's not even a weekend starter for Mississippi State. This is a guy that's going out there to see if he can't get Mississippi State off to a reasonable start, and then Chris Lemonis will react to that accordingly. Does he go to his big bullets out of the bullpen 3 or 4 innings in because he's right in it? Does LSU get after Ciari and Anderson's rolling through 5 shutout innings and you go, okay, maybe we pitch down a little bit. We try to even things tomorrow. We'll see. That's the plan, I think, for Mississippi State. That's can be looked at 2 different ways for your LSU. One, you've got a big advantage on the mound tonight. You got a big advantage on the mound and you're at home. So that's great. The other way to look at it is a little pressure on you tonight. You need to win the game. Because if LSU does not win tonight, you got Pico Khan coming at you tomorrow. And we'll talk about him on tomorrow's show. Usually entering the weekend, I got to kind of preview all 3 games at once because it's on a Friday and I won't see you again until Monday. I see you again tomorrow, so we'll talk about tomorrow. But tonight, LSU's got a big advantage. I'm looking for a few things out of LSU in this weekend series. I put some numbers to it at louisianasports.net. And we'll see how ambitious those numbers are, but I'm going to revisit them on Monday. We'll briefly talk about it tomorrow as well. I would like to see LSU limit the free bases from the pitching staff, walks and hit by pitches, to 10 for the weekend. That may sound ambitious, but LSU has done that this year. Against Purdue Fort Wayne, only 3 the entire weekend. Against North Alabama, only 10 the entire weekend. And against Texas, only 9 last week. It helped that on Friday night, Cade Anderson and Zach Callen went out there and didn't walk or hit anybody. But you only had 2 on Sunday when you lost. So you had it tonight. So in 3 of the 6, half the weekends, you've kept it 10 or under. Now you had 15 against Omaha, 15 in the Frisco tournament, and you had 20 against Missouri. I'll say this. You put 20 Mississippi State Bulldogs on base via hit by pitch and walk this weekend, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well. But if you can hold it to 10, I think that would be awesome. So that's one number that I'm looking at. And this is probably we'll revisit it tomorrow. That's the beauty of this midweek game where we're on a Thursday. I have carved out a rough sketch of what I think LSU's best pitching usage is for this week. And it's ambitious, and nothing ever goes to plan in a baseball game. But this is the way I see it kind of working out for LSU in summation. It's a lot of numbers, but you'll get the gist even if you can't follow all the numbers as you're driving around. There are 81 outs to be had in a weekend. Assuming the 10-run rule doesn't come into effect, you've got to get 81 outs, okay? I'm penciling Anderson in for 18 of those outs. That's 6 innings. I think that's very reasonable. Okay? Now, there are some other guys that have got to get more outs than they have been getting. Anderson's been doing that. I need some other guys to step up. Before Anderson gets 27 outs and goes a complete game, how about some other guys go a little bit deeper? Is this reasonable for Anthony Ianson and Chase Shores to get 27 total outs? Let me break that down for you. If Anthony Ianson works 5 2/3 innings, gets 2 outs in the 6th, I didn't say shutout, 3 runs, 4 runs. If he works 5 2/3, then Chase Shores can go 3 1/3, and you've gotten your 27 outs. 5 2/3, 3 1/3. That's all I'm looking for. I need 9 innings of work from those two guys. That's 27 outs. Here's one that's even bigger. Connor Ware needs to get 6 outs this weekend. He got 1 last weekend. I know he's better than that. You need 6 outs from Connor Ware. And then you look at Zach Cowan and Kason Evans, and I've got them penciled in for 15. That's 5 innings. That's a lot. But 3 innings from Cowan and 2 innings from Evans, I don't think is unreasonable at all. If you get that, that's 6 innings from Anderson, 9 innings from Ianson and Shores, 2 innings from Ware, and then 5 total between Cowan and Evans. You've eaten up the lion's share of your weekend. There are only 15 more to play with, and you've got an entire pitching staff of guys like DJ Primo and William Schmidt and Maverick Rizzi and Jacob Myers and Jaden Newt. Like, you've got other guys to get the other 15 outs, depending on the score and the time in the game. You figure you're probably not going to play 3 complete nail biters. So there are probably some games you can play with a little bit. But I think it's important to look at the top guys. Anderson, Ianson, Shores, Ware, Cowan, Evans. Those guys need to extend. And you've gotten it from Anderson, and you've gotten it from Cowan, and you've gotten it from Evans. That means Ianson, Shores, and Connor Ware have got to step up. And I don't know if it's tonight. I think tonight, if you play it by the book, you would love Anderson to go 7, and then you're up by 9 runs, and then you can throw whoever you want for the last 2. But usually, SEC games are a little tighter than that, and you probably have to use Evans or go to Cowan in this game. But it's just a collection of outs. And I'm not saying all these guys, well, the starters have to get them in one game, but the bullpen guys can get them elsewhere. But you've got to have a little bit more length and a little bit more effective from the top guys in this pen. I'm not asking Cooper Williams to go out there and give me 15 outs on a weekend. I'm looking at older players than Kason Evans, who's proven himself, to go do that. Now, Mississippi State has got some good bats. There are some guys that you've got to be concerned with. Ace Reese has been great. He's got 8 home runs this year. Hunter Hines, you never know on a weekend. He might strike out 7 times. He might hit 4 home runs. Last year, LSU went to Starkville. Mississippi State was reeling a little bit. Hines hit 2 homers in a single game. He's as physical a hitter as there is in the SEC, but he strikes out a ton. But you got to worry about those guys. State's a pretty good offensive team. They're a pretty good pitching team. Beyond Con, they don't have any superstars. They don't have Jurangelo Sanja. You know, last year you had 2 guys in that lineup you absolutely could not mess with. I don't see that right now with this team, but I think it's a little step up from Missouri, probably a little step down from Texas. You're at home, and tonight you've got a little bit of pressure on you to make sure you win with your ace on the mound, because there's a good one coming tomorrow, and you're going to have Anthony Ianson on the mound. So enjoy tonight if you're an LSU fan. Get the win, and then worry about the rest of the series starting tomorrow. That's our opening drive, brought to you by Genesis of Baton Rouge. We'll take a time out, come back, and talk with Luke Johnson. There's one position on the defense that the Saints have not really addressed, and I'd like to know why and what the plan is there. We'll talk with Luke about that coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge. I'm going to go with an estimate here that
35% of the listenership knows the Cubs and Dodgers played in Japan.
That's a very specific percentage.
I mean, that's kind of what I think. I don't think 50% of our listenership knows they played in the morning.
I would say
last
that
week.
I would probably go with like 30%.
Yeah, close. So either way, a small amount. So
Yeah.
for those that aren't aware, that did happen last week.
And
The
they
Cubs-
were regular season games.
They were, and they went to Japan. They played at 5:10 in the morning, and it was over at 9:45 or whatever it was. And my wife knew that I had watched those games, and she did know that it was opening day today because I put Myers in a baseball shirt. You want to know how locked in my wife is on professional athletics and really athletics total?
Yes.
She just texted me and asked, did the Cubs play again this morning, or do they play later?
Ah.
Said, well, they're not going to play in the morning again for like a long time. That was just a one-off with Japan, but just had no idea. Sometimes maybe they play in the morning.
Well,
Sometimes just, whatever.
Guess who's playing the Yankees at 2 o'clock today?
I don't know.
Just a wild guess about what's happening right now in this segment.
The Brewers?
Yes.
I got the Yankees?
They got 'em.
Got to put my pinstripes on.
Yeah.
Luke Johnson joins us on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. You watching the Brew Crew today?
I am unfortunately not going to be able to watch the game today because I'm on the road, and I'm really disappointed in that. But I do take solace in knowing that Milwaukee Brewers spy Craig Counsell is doing great things for me right now.
He did not do much for me last year. I do have Jackson Churio and Bryce Terang on my fantasy team. Really just because I hope they do very poorly, and if they don't, then I'll have them on my fantasy team for a little bit of a payoff.
Yeah, there you go. A former LSU Tiger signee,
That's right.
Bryce Terang.
That's right. All right, let's talk some.
Like there's like big parts of me when I'm watching and I'm like really happy that he didn't sign. And then, another big part of me is like, man, it would have been awesome to see him at Alec Box. But
yeah, there are a lot of those. A lot of those running around the big leagues these days. Trevor Story, Joey Gallo, I think just finished up in the majors, but a lot of guys that signed with LSU no longer there. Or Jacob Mizorowski would have been on the Skeens team. And he's slinging at 104 miles an hour for the Brewers. So, yeah, there's a lot of those guys that I would like to see in Baton Rouge. Let's talk some Saints. I want to talk specifically about one position here because I don't see a lot of activity, and I don't also see a lot of depth. So let's start at linebacker. DeMario Davis is still there. How much is left in that tank? I would imagine a reasonable amount.
Yeah, I think he's like maintained a couple of seasons. I think he's still a good player. I don't think he's like the elite level player that he was. Yeah, especially like when he first signed with the Saints, like he was like a demon sideline to sideline. He was really, really good in coverage, and I think he's better like going upfield now, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think he's like the full field coverage linebacker that he used to be. That's okay, but like they can't just like count on him to be like a superstar anymore. And I think they pair him with a very solid linebacker in Pete Werner, but Pete's not somebody who's going to make a ton of plays. And he's played in the NFL for 4 years now. I think he's got like a half of a sack and one fumble recovery, and that's about it on like the impact plays. So yeah, I don't think it'd be a bad idea for them to prep for the future a little bit there. They've kind of tried with some of these like mid-late round linebackers, but like we don't know what Jalen Ford is. Like we don't know what DeMarco Jackson is. At this stage in their career, they've only been special teams guys. So I think it is an area where we'll see them at, especially if they do like play some 3-4 base. Like they're going to have 4 linebackers on the field. One of those guys can be a glorified defensive end, but I think they need to add still to that position.
Do you think that's a free agency deal? Do you think it's another try to take a 4th rounder and see if we can't make it hit? Do you think that the most likely scenario is that one of those special teamers kind of graduates, to use that term?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's any of that. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around to number 9 and we hear the Saints are taking Jalen Walker or Jihad Campbell. I think either of those two guys could provide some value as off-ball linebackers while also giving you some pass rushing juice. So I think there's any number of ways this can go, but I do think that they're not done at the position. And I think it's important that they've shored up some of their other weaknesses, areas where I don't necessarily think they're completely done. I don't think signing Dylan Radins means they're not going to draft somebody who could be a potential starting offensive lineman for him. I don't think signing Brandon Cooks means they're out of potentially drafting Ted McMillan out of Arizona. I think they could still add another safety because Tyrann Mathieu in his mid-30s. It's not a position you have like your long-term future settled. But like linebacker is something that, as you've pointed out, they just haven't addressed it. They let Willie Gay walk in free agency. I think it's an incomplete position on the roster as it is.
Where would you put it on the needs list? I mean, there are a lot. We know. I mean, it's not necessarily considered a premium position. So where would you put it on their needs list?
Yeah, kind of like middle of the pack, yeah. Right? I think some of the stuff I was just talking about, some of those positions I still think are areas where I think they need to place more of their premium assets. I don't think they're done at receiver or potentially offensive line. I don't think they're done at corner because they signed Isaac Yiadom. I think they've got significant needs like across the board. I think they need a stand-up edge rusher. Somebody who they never would have acquired in the past, but can play a role in this Brandon Staley defense. So there's other things I would put ahead of it, but again, this roster is just so thin in terms of the depth that even though linebacker you can say they need to add there's just so many places they need to add right now on this roster.
Can I put words in your mouth a little bit here? You said
do.
This roster is, and you paused and you said thin. Is bad another word for that? I mean, you're going through all these needs they have. They need a player here. They need a player here. They need a player that we need. Is that too forward?
I think we're going to get a good sense of it this year, right? Because I think the Saints have been talking themselves into some of the talent they have on the roster. And I think you can adequately say, yes, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are good receivers. Alvin Kamara is a good running back. Alontae Taylor is a really nice player. Chase Young has potential to be a very good player in the right nice pieces. Eric McCoy, I think, is a top 5 interior lineman in the NFL. He's really good. You really like what you saw at Talifuaga in his rookie year. So there's talent on the roster. There's top end talent on the roster. But was their 5-12 season last year strictly because of injuries and a bad head coach? Or are you going to add somebody who I think is pretty widely regarded as a good coach in Kellen Moore and a smart coach, and they're still going to have problems? I think this year is going to be kind of a referendum on really how bad this roster is. Is it thin in terms of depth, or is it thin in terms of real top end talent?
One of the drums
I just have a hard time. I just have a hard time answering that question. It's just I think it remains to be seen.
I mean, it's all subjective anyway. One of the things that I've been talking about is I read this website here and that website here, and I listen to that podcast, or I see this report on whatever channel, and most people consider the Saints salary cap situation to be terrible and the roster to be getting old, and they're somewhere around 20th to 26th in the league and this or that. And then I see the Saints continuously trying to add players and trying to sign 30-year-old wide receivers. And I'm just it seems like everybody else is going, well, they'll probably figure this out eventually. And then what they do suggests that they don't really think the way that everybody else on the outside thinks. And I'm just curious, what would it take for them to actually think that way?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I don't know if they're ever going to come to that assessment that other people are making of this team. I don't know if that's really in Mickey Loomis's DNA to think about things that way. And maybe it's because he's 68, and when he got here, the Saints were kind of a bad franchise, and they went through one of the worst seasons you could ever possibly go through in 2005, and he doesn't want to go back to the dark days. But I think you make a really legitimate argument that might be a necessity. And maybe we're wrong, maybe they stay healthy this year. You look at the two teams in the Super Bowl. I mean, they had all of their players, and the Saints clearly did not. Maybe they stay healthy and they're a much better team than we all think they are, and anybody's giving them credit for. But they've been talking themselves into this for years now, and it's just it's every year there's a different reason for why it didn't work out. And I think it's going to be much harder next year if you have your handpicked coach. He comes in, he brings in a good staff, you retain the veteran quarterback to stay as competitive as possible. And if it still doesn't work out and you're still at best middle of the road NFL team and at worst something really bad, then like, can you really make the argument that it's going to work anymore? Like you had a hard time making that argument this year. And I think you can talk yourself into it a little bit when you see some of the moves. Justin Reed is a nice signing. Brandon Cooks is not going to be anybody's number one, but as a number 3, maybe that works out. Maybe they nail a draft class and they get some really good production out of those guys and turn things around quickly. But like, you're asking for a lot of things to happen.
No question about that. What's coming up for y'all? I know that the Combine is in the rearview mirror. Senior Bowl also in the rearview mirror. We're about a month out from the draft. So what's going on the Saints beat over there with y'all?
Yeah, we are compiling as much draft preview stuff as possible. Now that these pro days are starting to kind of get into full swing here. I mean, the Saints have been spread out all over the country scouting these guys. Their running backs coach was at like 5 different schools this week. Kellen Moore is at, I think, 3 already this week, maybe 4. They've got guys everywhere. And once that starts to die down, you start to get a little bit better sense of what they're looking at, what they need, and we're kind of, going to unveil position by position, saying like who could fit what the Saints need. And then I've got I'm working on something now. Should drop in a couple of weeks that I'm very excited about. So stay tuned on that. Can't really say much more about it outside of that.
That's all right. We'll stay tuned. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Luke.
Yes, sir.
Luke Johnson with The Advocate at by Luke Johnson on Twitter for all your Saints coverage. We appreciate him for stopping by each and every Thursday. We'll step aside. Joe Healy, D1 Baseball, SEC Extra. What does he think of these Mississippi State Bulldogs and the rest of the league? We'll talk about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Mississippi State this evening, 7 o'clock. You can listen to that on our sister station, Eagle 98.1. Pregame at 6:30. Chris Blair will be on the call. Tomorrow's game will be at 6:30. And then Saturday, they'll wrap up the series at 2 o'clock, weather permitting. That's a bad forecast on Saturday here in Baton Rouge, but they'll find a way to make it happen one way or another. Looking for your LSU baseball content and your SEC baseball content, no better spot than D1 Baseball's SEC Extra team. Mark Etheridge with us a couple days ago. Joe Healy with us every single Thursday. Joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Jared, thanks for the time. How are you?
Good, Hunt. I feel like we've reached that point of SEC play where that we've played just enough to start firing off some hot takes, but not long enough to actually be that convicted of them, which is I feel like that's the sweet spot. Yeah, well,
it's not slowing down anytime soon, so we'll find a spot here or there. LSU goes to the 40 acres for the first time in conference play last weekend and loses 2 of 3. Say more about LSU. Say more about Texas. What say you?
I think it says more about Texas. I ultimately don't have a ton of worry about LSU and where they're at. I think this Texas team is going to be really tough at home. And as long as this Texas team stays healthy, I think they're just going to be a real pain. Like I think I've said on your air before, I don't really see them as a national title contender, but I do think it's kind of an Omaha level team just because winning is a skill and they've kind of figured out how to win. I mean, the pitching is not frankly that impressive. The lineup is good, but it's not like riddled with superstars like some other lineups out there. And yet they just kind of continue to win games. And I have to imagine they're going to be even more dangerous as the season goes on and they kind of get things a little more figured out on the mound.
Georgia hit 1 billion home runs in Gainesville, and Florida has not won a league game yet. What did you learn more in that sweep from Georgia's offense and their ability to go there and win, or Florida just kind of in free fall?
Yeah, I think it's more Georgia, honestly. Like, they've done such a good job in the portal because let's be honest, like, Rylan Zaborowski and Robbie Burnett were nice players at their previous stops, but this was not Andrew Fisher, who'd, been a proven SEC slugger who just moved to a different SEC school, or Liam Doyle, or pick your big name portal guy, right? Daniel Dickinson. Like, that's a big name. These guys weren't that, and yet they've been 2 of the better hitters in the country. And for all of the consternation about the pitching staff not living up to its potential, which I agree with, they already have more depth than they had last year. They got to a super regional using like 4 or 5 pitchers, and they're already better than that. So that's impressive stuff. And I will say on Florida, I think a couple things are happening. They're probably not going to be as good as we thought they were, like just based on the results. That's true, but they played the 2 teams that are probably the 2 toughest teams in the country to play if you're beat up on the mound, in Tennessee and Georgia. So I do think there is going to be some bounce back there, but we do need to downward adjust our expectations. And compared to A&M, I have a lot more faith in Florida getting back on track, because I think a lot of it is health related, whereas A&M, I think a lot of it's between the ears, to be honest with you.
Missouri got swept again over the weekend after they left Baton Rouge, went home, and Ole Miss took all 3 games, but they did hit again in all 3 games. So do you think that Missouri's maybe got a little spunk offensively, even if they're not a very good baseball team?
Yeah, I actually do, funny enough. Like, and the thing is, like, if they had actually just pitched up to their potential, because let's not forget, Mizzou was like right in the middle of the pack in the SEC in most pitching stats last year. So if they had just pitched that well so far, like, they might have got that Ole Miss series, frankly. It was pretty reasonably close. I also, though, think it says something about Ole Miss's pitching staff. We've talked about this. Like, I think Hunter Elliott's back on track. I think he's a legit Friday guy. Like, he's not, total upper crust Friday guy probably, but he's certainly very good. But there are 2 other guys who are pretty hittable, and they're still kind of figuring out what they are in the bullpen. And so I do think if Ole Miss is going to be a postseason team, and that remains to be seen, they're going to have to acquire the skill of being able to win kind of ugly, high-scoring games in rubber matches, because that kind of feels like what they're destined to be in a ton of.
LSU and Mississippi State will start tonight in one of the Thursday series, and Pico Khan is not going to pitch in this game. Cade Anderson will pitch for LSU. Does that put any pressure on LSU tonight with Khan going on Friday against Anthony Ianson?
I suppose so, and it feels a little reminiscent of, I believe, and you can correct me, how you'd probably remember better than I do, like Mississippi State pitched off of Paul Skeens maybe when Skeens was at LSU and then won that series, or so like this is a strategy. I don't love it from a competitive standpoint, but it's part of the game in college baseball where you play 3 games every weekend and there's no deviation in the schedule. But I do think it creates like a little bit of risk there for LSU of like, hey, even if you get this first game of the series, your Khan's going to give them an advantage in that second game, and then what do you get from Chase Shores in that third game? Now, of course, Mississippi State has its own issues they're dealing with, so I think that's kind of a coin flip, but it does create a little more intrigue in the series for sure.
I've seen a lot of teams pitch off of Skeens, and Aaron Nola was dominant for 2 years at LSU, and I saw multiple teams do that as well. You kind of get a built-in excuse when you get the Thursday series and say, I'm just keeping it on his normal rest. Like if you were to bump a guy back from his normal Friday spot onto Saturday, your whole team would go, we're doing what now? But you can kind of massage it when you get a day here, and that's kind of what Mississippi State gets. State's offense, what do you think?
I'm not overly inspired, I got to be honest with you. Now, I do like that Hunter Hines swung the bat a little bit better over the weekend, so that certainly they're just going to need him. But I don't really love it when you consider that, Ace Reese is their best power hitter. He's pretty dynamic, but he has the same strikeout issues Hunter Hines has. I was wrong about Noah Sullivan. I didn't think that was going to necessarily translate from the Big South to the SEC, but he's done it. But, you look beyond Sullivan and, with Hunter Hines and Ace Reese having big holes in their swings, I'm a little bit worried from that standpoint for Mississippi State. But what makes me even more worried, frankly, is that some of the sloppy stuff we saw 2 years ago when they weren't good has started to creep back in. Like they're not good defensively. They threw the ball all around last weekend against Oklahoma. They have problems at catcher. Now, part of that's because Ross Highfield got hit in the face and like that sucks. And so they're having to play Joe Powell again. But they're not good at catcher. They're not good defensively. And they trust like just a couple of pitchers and that's it. And that kind of feels a little like 2023 Mississippi State. So if I'm a State fan, I'm a little bit nervous moving forward, especially given you lose this series, suddenly you're staring down to being 2-8 in the league, and that's just so hard to come back from, or 2-7, whatever. Yeah.
I look at the SEC scoreboard, and there's just ranked teams just all over the place, and I look and there's a great ranked matchup. There's a great ranked matchup. Auburn and Georgia over in Athens. That's a really tough place to play them, and I don't love Auburn's pitching staff. I saw Sam Dutton for 3 years, and he's been really good at points and then wasn't as great last week. What do you think of Auburn's chances in Athens?
Yeah, you're just going to have to go in there with the mindset, and I think this actually gives Auburn a little bit of a chance. you have to go into that series thinking, look, the pitching plan doesn't matter because the pitching plan is going to get blown up because Georgia's going to hit home runs and we're probably going to hit some too. And we just have to be flexible and understand that nobody's coming out of this weekend with an ERA better than what they came in with. Like, that's just probably not going to happen. So if you can adjust to that mindset, and I think with Auburn being a team that, look, for the last 2-3 years, they've had to kind of like just experiment on the mound week after week. So I think they're kind of comfortable in that type of environment. I think there are a lot of teams that go in there, and I think Kentucky was one. The minute they got thrown off schedule against Georgia, they just don't have any way to rebound, and they get shell-shocked, and they're not sure what to do. I think Auburn, that's kind of how they live on the mound. I think they're a little more comfortable in that, and certainly their offense has been swinging it well. Even when they didn't have Ike Irish, they were fine offensively. Now he's back and had like 5 hits in the finale or the Saturday game of last weekend. So they're dangerous in their own right. But right now, I just don't know if any pitching staff can slow down Georgia enough.
Especially not in that ballpark right now. It's just a launching pad for them. Oklahoma is in Tuscaloosa. LSU will go to Norman for the first time next week. We know about Kyson Witherspoon at the front of that rotation. They won 2 games without him last week after calling out Duldum up there. So what do you think about that series in Tuscaloosa, Oklahoma and Alabama, top 15 matchup?
Yeah, it feels like a little bit of one of those series that we could look back on and it had a lot of bearing on how things shook out because both of these teams feel like somewhere between 14 and 23 nationally, something like that, just to pick random numbers. They could host if things break right. They could be a really high-end 2 seed in different scenarios. So this feels like a coin flip series that could have a lot of impact on how these teams end up, being in the postseason pecking order late in the year. Oklahoma's offense has started to backslide a little bit. I was pretty impressed with that group to start the season because that was their big question. And conversely, Alabama just is swinging the bat really well. They did a really nice job in the portal and in the JUCO ranks, bringing in some fresh bats in that lineup. So to me, the deal is if Alabama can get good stuff from Zane Adams and Riley Quick and whoever they are, they throw on the mound Sunday, I like their chances because I really like their offense. If Oklahoma can get those guys out of the game early, Alabama's bullpen doesn't really inspire me. I think Oklahoma could get this series on the road. But ultimately, if Alabama stays on schedule relatively pitching-wise, I think they're going to be okay.
What is the atmosphere going to be like in College Station this weekend? You got a 2-4 Kentucky team coming in. They're 0-6. I'm very interested in just the environment at Bluebell because of what's going on.
Yeah, I don't have a great feel for it, to be honest with you. I think there's a chance it's antagonistic, not towards the opponent, but towards their own team. Now, Aggies don't tend to boo. They do tend to be like a pretty like, hey, we don't boo our guys. We don't get negative about it. And yet that we might see some of that this weekend because it's just, I think there's a frustration level, and understandably so, that is just beyond anything we could have comprehended. And if they're not able on their home field to win the series against a Kentucky team that's taken a step back and, isn't as talented as they were last year and frankly doesn't, have the offense to really hurt you when A&M is still pitching pretty well, that feels like a new low. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Kentucky. I just mean, A&M, this is a series that A&M had to check off before the season and say, hey, we need to get greedy and get a sweep here. And now you're looking at it and saying, can we please just win a series? They're putting a lot on Caden Sorrell coming back, and he's not this weekend necessarily, but he's a nice player. But if you're pegging your hopes on Caden Sorrell getting back in the lineup to turn things around, I think it just goes to show how tough a spot they're in right now.
Look, this listener base knows about Ole Miss's national championship year and what they started in. They know what Tennessee was in 23. They know what LSU was last year. They know what Florida was last year. We're all aware in this town, that you can turn it around after 6 games, but it's got to start somewhere, and I don't know that it's going to start in Knoxville. I don't think it's going to start in Athens. I don't think it's going to start in Fayetteville, which are all left on the docket for A&M. It needs to start pretty quickly, no?
Yeah, 100%, because you already, the Alabama series was one that you're looking at, and you're like, all right, series win. Maybe we can get greedy and sweep it. And they got swept in that one. So they've already lost so much ground that they're going to have to perform in some series coming up on the road even better than what we assumed they could do when we thought they were the number 1 team in the country. So the idea that they're going to go from this to actually outperforming some of the expectations we could have ever put on them basically overnight just seems kind of foolish. I mean, I'm with you. we year after year, there's going to be a team that starts slow and ends up being in the postseason mix. But I've seen basically nothing here that gives me a ton of confidence in a big turnaround.
Me either. We'll certainly see. If you're looking for your D1 Baseball podcast, Highway to Hoover, wherever you find your podcast, Joe and Mark do an incredible job. Joe's with us every single Thursday. Enjoy the baseball. We'll talk next week. Thanks.
All right. You too, on. See you, buddy.
Joe Healy, D1 Baseball's SEC Extra team. We'll come back and close out hour one. Coming up next,
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Look, they can't make it any easier on you as far as the buying experience goes. You can start online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. You can swing on by the dealership, Airline at Piku. Their brand ambassadors are phenomenal. They're not going to be pressuring you. They're not going to be breathing down your neck. They're not going to upsell you. They're going to treat you like a guest. They'll get you behind the wheel. They'll show you the safety features. They'll get you all the bells and whistles, and you'll feel the difference when you get behind the wheel of a Genesis. And if you don't want to go by the dealership, which I recommend that you do, but you don't have to. They'll come to you. Like I said, it can't be any easier. They'll come to your home. They'll come to your work and get behind the wheel and test drive. If you've never been behind the wheel of a Genesis, which is probably most of you, try it today. Go to Genesis of Baton Rouge. Check them out online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Closing out hour number one here. Beck's got the Wrigley Field shirt on today. I got the Cubs gear on today. It's opening day across Major League Baseball. The Cubs have the worst record in baseball currently. They do. 0-2. They went to Tokyo and lost a couple games, but still exciting nonetheless. Cubs out in Arizona this evening for a 9:10 first pitch. So the Cubs went from 5:10 a.m. first pitches to 9:10 p.m. first pitches.
Beautiful stuff.
I don't know if I can promise I'm going to be up for that whole thing.
I can't either.
I would have been if we weren't in the middle of just complete chaos in the Palmer house. But I'm fired up for it. And for those that follow a team, whether you're a Cubs fan, whether you're an Astros fan, Braves fans, there's probably some Rangers fans around here. Unfortunately, there are probably some Cardinals fans listening. I don't wish you a ton of success this year, and I don't think I'm going to have to worry about that, quite frankly. But if you're a Major League Baseball fan, a happy opening day to you. I talk about this all the time. If you're a big football fan, football fandom is like the early stages of dating, where like you may live in a different place or y'all don't live together, and so you're like you spend the weekends together, and it's just like very intense, and it's like so awesome, and then you kind of have to wait till the next weekend. A baseball fandom, Major League Baseball fandom, it's kind of like a roommate. Like they're just there every day. It's consistent. You might have a bad day, but like you're gonna come back the next day, it'll be fine. Like it's more my speed. It's why college baseball is my speed. It's more my speed with this. Like I love waking up in the morning, checking, okay, what time is first pitch for the Cubs? Who's on the mound today? Okay, who pitched yesterday out of the bullpen? Like the rhythm of a season is awesome. And it's even better when you feel like on opening day you really have a chance. And while I kind of thought the Cubs had a chance last year, it's been a while since they tore everything down, and now they've kind of built it back up, and they should be good this year. So it's an exciting time. You understand that none of the games they play for the next few months are massively intense, although they all count the same. But it's just a good kickstart, and I'm excited to watch a little ball. Are we going to win the division back?
Yes. Yes, I think so.
What gives you that confidence?
Well, the Cardinals stink.
They quit. They literally didn't spend a cent in free agency. That's very special. The Cardinals ownership group spent the same amount of money as me on free agents this year, which is zero.
Yeah, and then the Reds. I mean, they're just the Reds. They're always
dudes that throw real hard. You're not scared of Rhett Lauder, former Wake Forest Demon Deacon in the rotation.
That I'm good with that. Joey Votto's done. They have Ellie De La Cruz, who's
I may need to figure out if Skeens and Lauder pitch against each other, Reds and Pirates, and I've got the MLB package. I may have to watch that one for some vibes.
You would see some you'd see a lot of miles per hour on the radar guns, but. So I don't really worry about
the Brew Crew. They ditch their closer, their shortstop's out the window, their ace is gone.
This
they don't care. They just keep winning.
Yeah, and exactly. No, this division just always seems to be who's really caring that much. And it's always like the Brewers just by default end up winning because the Cubs stubbed their toe for a month or two in the season, which is what happened last year. And so, and the Pirates, maybe the Pirates will be a little better, but I still don't think they're a threat. So it's going to be the Cubs and the Brewers at this point. And,
let's hope so.
And I think the Cubs have done
4 seconds.
enough. I think they've done enough.
We'll talk about the Sweet 16 after SportsCenter. Chris Blair in 20 minutes.
The Hunt Palmer Show